It's funny how sometimes you completely forget about a place and then bam, it's all over the news. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what's happened with Greenland recently.
Totally.
It's gone from, like, this distant, icy land to the center of some serious international drama.
Right.
There's the whole thing with their new government, and then we've got the U.S. Well, let's just say they seem pretty interested in Greenland, to put it mildly.
Interested is one way to put it.
So for this deep dive, we're going deep on Greenland, trying to figure out just what's making it such a hot topic on the global stage.
It's a fascinating situation.
I know, right? And you dug up some really interesting news articles, each one giving us a different angle on this story.
I try to cover all the bases.
You did great. So what we're going to do today is break down all this info, help you understand the main players, what they're after, and what it all might mean in the grand scheme of things.
Sounds good.
You ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it.
Well, I think one of the first things that really jumps out is the timing of everything. As Greenland was figuring out its new political scene after those elections back on March 11th, they suddenly found themselves dealing with a lot of attention from the outside world, particularly from the United States.
Yeah, that's a pretty big coincidence, don't you think?
It's definitely noteworthy. And it's also interesting that 4 out of the 5 parties that got seats in Greenland's parliament decided to form a coalition government.
Wow, so they're really putting up a united front.
Exactly. And when you think about it, that means they've got about 75% of the population behind them, which is a pretty strong majority.
So who's in charge of this new coalition?
The Democrats are the leading party, and their leader, Jens-Frederik Nielsen, is now the prime minister.
Okay, and what's their stance on, the whole independence thing?
From what I've read, they're sort of centrist liberal, and while they definitely see independence as a goal down the road, they're taking a much more cautious and measured approach.
So no sudden moves towards breaking away.
It doesn't seem like it. Their focus seems to be on getting things right before making any drastic changes.
Makes sense.
And the coalition itself is quite diverse, which is interesting. There's the Inuit community, a party that's all about environmentalism and leans more to the left. Their leader, Múte Bourup Egede, was actually the prime minister before, and now he's in charge of the finances.
Oh, so he's got experience.
Yeah, he does. And then there's Forward, which is more of a social democratic party. And get this, there's also Solidarity, which is the only party in the whole coalition that actually wants to stick with Denmark.
That's kind of surprising considering all the talk about independence.
Right. But the fact that they've all come together, this broad spectrum of political views, really shows how much they want to create some stability on the home front while they deal with all these pressures from the outside world.
It sounds like they're trying to find that sweet spot, balancing their internal differences while presenting a united front to everyone else.
Right, exactly. And then you have the opposition party, Naleraq, which got the second highest number of votes in the election.
Okay, what are they all about?
Well, they're all for immediate independence, like right now. And some reports have even labeled them as having viewpoints similar to, Trumpian stances, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, wow. So there's a pretty clear divide there.
Yeah, definitely. And you have to wonder if this whole coalition forming was, at least in part, a strategic move to present a more stable and unified image to the rest of the world, especially when it comes to dealing with someone like, President Trump.
I see what you mean. It's like they're trying to get their house in order before inviting any strong-willed guests over.
Exactly. And Prime Minister Nielsen himself has been very vocal about this whole thing. He's talked about how the coalition is focused on facing the strong external pressures and how important it is for them to be unified.
Smart move.
Yeah, I think so too. And, he even made a pretty pointed comment about how the U.S. delegation visited Greenland while they were still in the process of forming a government.
What did he say about that?
He basically said it showed a lack of respect for an ally.
Ouch. That's a pretty direct jab.
It is. And it really tells you something about the current state of affairs between Greenland and the U.S.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some tension there.
Definitely some underlying friction. And it's worth noting that Nielsen also seems to have a very specific idea about how he wants Greenland's relationship with Denmark to evolve. He's talked about wanting a renewed partnership, one based on equality, which suggests a more gradual and respectful path towards greater autonomy.
So it sounds like he's envisioning independence, but on Greenland's own terms and timeline.
Precisely. It's about building towards independence in a way that feels right for them.
Makes sense. It's like they're saying, we'll get there, but we're going to do it our way.
Exactly. And that leads us right into the whole thing about the increased interest from the U.S., and particularly Vice President Vance's visit.
Oh, yeah, that visit was interesting.
To say the least. I mean, think about it. He landed in Greenland on the very same day that they were announcing their new government agreement.
You can't make this stuff up. It's almost too perfect, like something out of a movie.
I know, right? That's like he wanted to make a statement by showing up right at that moment.
I mean, it's not exactly a secret that Donald Trump has been pretty vocal about wanting to, acquire Greenland.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely made that clear. Remember all those comments about needing it for international security and world peace?
Yeah, those were pretty sweeping statements.
They were. But, it's interesting because this whole idea isn't exactly brand new. Putin actually pointed out that the U.S. has been interested in Greenland for a long time, like going back to the 1860s.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah, and then after World War II, they even made an offer to buy it from Denmark.
Wow, so Trump's not the first one to have this idea.
Nope, not at all. But I think what makes it so different this time around is how direct and, well, unconventional President Trump's approach has been.
That's putting it mildly. And speaking of unconventional, Vice President Vance's trip was definitely not your typical diplomatic visit.
Definitely not. It was originally supposed to be a much longer trip, with cultural events and all that. He was even bringing his wife, Usha.
Sounds like a nice vacation.
It does, right. But then suddenly it gets shrunk down to just a single day, just a quick stop at the U.S. Space Force base at Pituffik.
What happened?
Well, the reports suggest that there were protests and that, well, Greenland didn't exactly extend an official invitation for a more extensive visit.
Oh, that's a bit awkward.
To say the least. And I don't know if you saw this, but Vance was reported to have said something like, "It's cold as sun here," when he arrived.
Oh, no. Did he really say that?
Yeah, according to some reports. Not exactly the most diplomatic way to start a visit, right?
Yeah, that's a bit rough. But then it sounds like he got more serious in his official statements.
Oh, yeah, he definitely shifted gears. He started talking about how Denmark wasn't investing enough in Greenland, both in terms of its security and the well-being of its people.
Okay, that's a pretty bold claim to make.
It is. And then he went even further and said that Greenland would be a lot better off if it was under U.S. protection and influence, both in terms of security and economically.
Whoa, that's a pretty strong statement to make, especially considering all the tension surrounding the visit.
It definitely is. And it's interesting because while Vice President Vance was a little softer on the idea of using military force, he even said something like, "We don't think military force will ever be necessary." We can't forget that President Trump has made some, shall we say, more ambiguous remarks in the past.
Ambiguous.
Yeah, like, remember how he was open to exploring different ways to acquire Greenland?
Yeah, that didn't go over too well, if I remember correctly.
No, it didn't. And it's interesting because the U.S. delegation was pretty high level. They had National Security Advisor Mike Waltz.
Wait, isn't he the one involved in that whole Chatgate thing?
Yeah, that's him. There have been reports about some potentially influential private conversations that might have played a role in how the visit went down.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. And they also had the Secretary of Energy and a U.S. Senator. So it's clearly a delegation meant to cover a lot of ground, from security to energy to just overall strategic positioning.
Sounds like they had a full agenda planned.
They did. But it seems like the Greenlandic people themselves weren't too thrilled about all this attention.
Yeah, I read about the protests.
Exactly. There were protests, and there were reports that people in Nuuk, the capital, even refused to meet with Usha Vance. And some people were even holding up signs that said things like, "Make America go away."
Wow, that's pretty direct. It sounds like they're really pushing back against this whole idea of being absorbed by the U.S.
They are. And can you blame them? They're fiercely proud of their identity and don't want to be treated like some kind of pawn in a geopolitical game.
I totally get it.
Yeah, it's understandable. And the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, has been very outspoken about this whole thing too. She's condemned the U.S. for what she called unacceptable pressure and has made it very clear that Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders.
So Denmark's standing by Greenland?
It seems like it. They're in a tricky spot though, right?
Yeah.
They have this long history with Greenland, but they're also allies with the U.S., so they have to try to balance those relationships carefully.
It's a diplomatic tightrope walk.
It really is. Okay, but back to Greenland for a second. Why is everyone so focused on this seemingly remote, icy island? I mean, what's the big deal?
Yeah. What is it about Greenland that's making it so strategically important all of a sudden?
Well, there are a few reasons. For starters, its location is super strategic. It's basically a gateway between the Arctic Ocean and the North Atlantic, which means it's crucial for keeping an eye on shipping routes and potential military activity.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it also plays a key role in the U.S. ballistic missile early warning system, which is obviously a big deal for national security.
Gotcha.
Plus, with climate change, the Arctic is becoming more accessible, and that means everyone's suddenly interested in what's up there. China, Russia, they're all paying attention to Greenland and its potential as a shipping route and because of its natural resources.
So it's all about resources. Like, what kind of stuff are we talking about?
Oh, there's a lot up there. Gas, oil, and get this, rare earth minerals, the kind that are essential for all our modern tech gadgets.
Wow, so Greenland's like a treasure chest just waiting to be opened.
In a way, yeah. And there's this thing called the Giat Gap, which is like a strategically important corridor in the Arctic.
What's that all about?
Well, it's a narrow passage between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK.
Okay.
And basically the thinking is that whoever controls Greenland would have a major advantage in controlling this corridor, which would give them a lot of power in the Arctic.
So Greenland's location makes it a key player in the whole Arctic power struggle.
Exactly. It's not just about Greenland itself, it's about its role in a much bigger game.
And I'm guessing Putin's not too happy about all this U.S. interest in Greenland.
He's definitely not thrilled. He's even said that Trump's plans are serious, and he's worried that NATO countries are starting to see the Arctic as a potential battleground.
Oh, wow. So things could get really heated up there.
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
And even the European Union has weighed in, saying that Greenland deserves partners who respect you and treat you as equals.
Sounds like a subtle dig at the U.S.
Yeah, it could definitely be interpreted that way.
Okay, so what do you think is really motivating Trump to keep pushing for control of Greenland?
Well, there are probably a few things at play. National security is obviously a big one, especially with all the increased activity from other major powers in the Arctic. And then there's the strategic advantage that Greenland offers.
Oh,
It's like a key piece on the chessboard in this whole Arctic power play.
makes sense.
And of course, let's not forget the potential economic benefits of getting access to all those natural resources. Probably a combination of all these factors that's driving his interest.
But what about Greenland? What do they want out of all this?
It seems pretty clear that what they want more than anything is self-determination and eventual independence. They don't want to be treated like some kind of bargaining chip or a piece of property.
I want to control their own destiny.
Exactly. And Prime Minister Nielsen really summed it up when he said, "We don't want to be American. We don't want to be Danish. We want to be Greenlandic, and we want our independence in the future."
Powerful statement.
It is. They want respect, and they want to be treated as equals on the global stage.
And Denmark's stuck in the middle of all this.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for them. They've got this long history with Greenland, but they also need to maintain their relationship with the U.S.
Talk about a diplomatic balancing act.
Right, but their statements seem to indicate that they're going to support Greenland in this whole thing, which is a pretty big deal.
It is. Okay, so as we wrap up this Greenland deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, the big things to remember are that Greenland has a new government that's taking a slow and steady approach towards independence.
Okay.
And that this is all happening while the U.S. is showing a lot of interest to the region, which is causing some tension, not just with Greenland, but also with Denmark.
Yeah, things are definitely heating up in the Arctic.
They are. And I think this whole situation really highlights how important the Arctic is becoming in global politics, especially with climate change and the race for resources.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for everyone listening. Think about all the different forces at play here. You've got a nation that wants to decide its own future, but you've also got major world powers with their own strategic interests, and it's all happening in a region that's changing rapidly because of climate change.
Makes you wonder what the future holds for Greenland and the Arctic in general, right?
It does. What does this tell us about how sovereignty and... Easy answers. And the story's not over yet. Things are still unfolding, and it'll be fascinating to see how Greenland's relationships with both Denmark and the U.S. evolve over time. Maybe this deep dive will inspire you to explore the history of Greenland's ties to these countries. You might be surprised by what you discover. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of the Arctic.
It's been a great conversation.
Thanks again for joining me.
Anytime.
See ya.